President Trump's tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China set to go into effect tomorrow, barring a last-second change of heart. All those countries now vowing to fight back. Canada announcing retaliatory tariffs of 25% on $30 billion worth of U.S. goods. In 3 weeks, another $125 billion could be added. Mexico plans on announcing what they'll do in a few hours. China promising corresponding countermeasures. Canada also going a step further by taking some U.S. products off store shelves and vowing to boycott other products.
There are many ways for you to do your part. It might mean checking the labels at the supermarket and picking Canadian-made products. It might mean opting for Canadian rye over Kentucky bourbon, or foregoing Florida orange juice altogether.
Foregoing Florida orange juice. Joining us now to discuss, Jason Furman, former chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors. Sir, good morning to you. Thanks so much for being here.
Morning.
Let's just start with the impact of this. I mean, we've been watching Dow futures, for example, all morning, down around 500 points. Now it's 600 points. There you can see the other markets, the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ, as we anticipate, the U.S. absorbing what we learned from the president over the weekend. What's the impact?
Yeah, so first of all, most markets are down. So Americans are losing retirement savings. And by the way, the markets are not fully pricing in these tariffs. They still think they might go away. They might go away quickly. If they last, it's going to be even more. The one market that's gone up is oil prices. They're up enough that they're going to make it cost you an extra 80 cents to fill the tank of your car. And again, that could go higher.
So what impact does this have? And what's the difference between, and maybe you can help us understand why Canada is facing 25%, whereas China, the tariff is at 10%, obviously an adversary versus an ally?
I don't think anyone can help you with that question. I mean, it just boggles the mind. You say it's fentanyl, they say it's fentanyl. 40 pounds came over the border from Canada to the United States. A bunch of fentanyl went from the United States to Canada. By the way, those are tiny numbers compared to what you're seeing on the Mexican border. Canada's an incredibly close ally. And it's not just that products are going to become more expensive. It's going to be really hard, for example, for American auto companies to keep their plants open if this trade war continues and escalates.
Jason, tariffs have been used by both Democratic and Republican administrations in recent years. I mean, President Biden did not undo some of the tariffs that Donald Trump had put into place. This is a tool that in a post-NAFTA America and the resulting the populism that has resulted from that is not necessarily always unpopular with American consumers. Is there a role for tariffs? And if so, what do you think that is?
Yeah, so this is just at a completely different scale. President Biden added tariffs on $18 billion of stuff. This is $1.4 trillion of stuff. So this is about 100 times more extensive than the tariffs that President Biden did. And it is true that you couldn't quite see the price increases from the Trump tariffs. The Biden ones even less, because many of them weren't on consumer goods or were delayed. Here, people will see it. People are already getting notices from some of the businesses they deal business with that their prices are going up because of these tariffs. You're going to see job loss if these tariffs continue. I think this is going to be the moment when people figure out that a globally integrated economy is good for them both as consumers and as workers.
CNN's Vanessa Yurkevich is with us now. Prices the Americans pay could be going up.
This is what people are going to care about, what they're paying every single day. A trade war, really, there is no winners at the end of the day, according to almost every economist that I've spoken to. And there's going to be some losses for the American consumers because even though we're putting these tariffs on Canada and Mexico and China, we as Americans pay for those goods as they come into the country. So just let's look at some of these key items. Food. This is something that Americans have been struggling with for a while now. Prices at at the grocery store. And we import, as you mentioned, a ton of avocados, 90% from Mexico, and the Super Bowl is just around the corner. And these are perishable items, so they have to come in every so often. That's going to go up in price. Also from Canada, grain, livestock, meat, and poultry. Another thing that we need to look at is auto parts, right? Auto parts are in particular really important because so many of the cars that are assembled in the U.S. have auto parts that come from Canada, Mexico. Also fully assembled vehicles coming right into the country. That's going to raise prices potentially by about $3,000 per vehicle. Also wooden lumber, right? We get about 30% from Canada, and then we get drywall components from Mexico, 70%. So when you're talking about home prices, that could potentially raise the price of homes. We have a home shortage in the country. We need to be building more. Any raw materials that are more expensive are going to make home prices more expensive. Also shoes. 50%, over 50% come from China, so that's going to raise the price of shoes. Fertilizer is interesting. I just want to point this out because there's a key component in fertilizer called potash. We get that from Canada, about 80%. That's going to impact farmers who grow all of our foods. These are just some of the items, including beer, wine, bourbon, perfume, that come from Mexico, Canada, and China. The U.S. consumer is going to pay those increased costs.
Pretty much across the board. The question is, how long will these tariffs last? That could play into it as well. Vanessa Yurkevich, thank you very much for that. Kate?
Joining us to talk much more about this is CNN economics and political commentator, also an opinion columnist at the Washington Post, Catherine Rempel. Thanks for coming back in, Catherine. So even President Trump, which is noteworthy, President Trump is now acknowledging the reality that everyone else knew, which is when this trade war begins, Americans are going to feel the pain. The way he put it was, we may have short-term some little pain. What is that pain going to look like?
So it depends on the product. But we are already seeing some prices being passed through. For example, customers of Irving Energy, which is a Canadian company that supplies fuel oil and propane to much of New England, they were notified yesterday that they will bear the entire cost of those tariffs immediately. You also have lots of produce that's coming over the border, things that companies could not stock up on, unlike refrigerators or cars or what have you. Right ahead of the Super Bowl, as we've heard, guac's going to cost extra, essentially. And then you have a lot of other things that may filter through to the economy a little bit later. So I mentioned autos. The typical automotive part that is produced in the United States, that is, we are told is an American company that's made in the United States for a car that's American, it actually crosses borders between Canada and Mexico multiple times, as many as 7 or 8 times. Each time that crosses the border, it's going to incur another 25% tariff. Wow. So that will weigh on auto costs, or at the very least shut down supply chains and make autos not available.
One thing that Kevin Liptak was pointing out, and we heard from Canadian officials are saying that this morning, they don't know what the measure of progress is. They don't know what you do this and the tariffs go away from Donald Trump. Is it clear at all to anyone? Does anyone have a guess what that metric is?
Unfortunately, no. Trump has been unclear about what he wants, what concessions these countries could even make to appease him. And he even has said there's nothing they can do, right? This is about raising tariff money. Lots of Wall Street analysts had assumed that these trade threats, these tariff threats, were a negotiating ploy. Right. But he has not really made specific demands that he wants them to negotiate over. He has also not engaged in negotiation.
You make a great point. We heard that from over and over again in the election, the lead up to Election Day, that this is a negotiating tactic and potentially a very successful one. It looks like it is much more than that. Now, the Wall Street Journal writing this morning in an editorial, the headline, "The Dumbest Trade War in History." Leaving China aside, Mr. Trump's justification for this economic assault on the neighbors makes no sense. Drugs have flowed into the U.S. for decades and will continue to do so as long as Americans keep using them. Neither country can stop it. Drugs may be an excuse since Mr. Trump has made clear he likes tariffs for their own sake. It's getting to your point. What's best case, worst case here?
I think the best case scenario is maybe Trump sees that markets freak out, and markets haven't opened yet, so we'll see how they react. Right. And he says, okay, I need an off-ramp. And they come up with some sort of fig leaf, right, that the countries decide that they're going to create a fentanyl task force that's relatively meaningless. Because again, what is Canada really going to do in this situation here? Arguably, there's more that Mexico can do, but Canada, I don't know. But then everybody gets to save face and the tariffs are taken off the table. That's the best case scenario. I don't know if it'll happen because Trump seems to have dug in his heels. The worst case scenario is that, as we have heard, we impose tariffs, these other countries impose counter tariffs. Trump jacks up his tariffs even higher, which the executive order indicated he would, and you get a series of these tit for tat trade wars that, you know, an eye for an eye leaves everybody blind. You end up with higher prices, fewer jobs. We haven't even talked about the cost of the retaliatory tariffs hurting American businesses and their employees, and you have a potential huge drag on the economy, potentially leading to a recession. And I say all of this not as if this is an entire hypothetical. We actually saw this happen in the early 1930s when the United States launched a global trade war with an act known as Smoot-Hawley that then led to these tit-for-tat tariffs and trade wars around the world that are widely believed to have worsened the Great Depression.